So, like in the previous section, I mentioned the storytelling with Databook. Some really good examples here. Everydaydashboards.com, I think, is done by Chris Love, and that just it's a place where people publish their non-confidential dashboards that they've created. That because a lot of the time on Tableau Public, you'll see these amazing visualizations that are more storytelling features. They're more infographic-y, maybe long-form dashboards. Whereas on Everyday Dashboards, you can go there and it's a really good resource for finding high quality, well-designed dashboards that you can then use as templates for your own company. And then on the same side of that, we've got the Big Book of Dashboards by Steve Wexler, Jeffrey Schaefer, and Andy Cockgreave, and they've got another, I think there's 25, 30 maybe examples in different contexts of well-designed dashboards, and they go through and explain why they're really well-designed dashboards, why they're important for the context that they're made in. So the dashboard, the humble dashboard. I like to put this slide up because this is kind of the beginning of the dashboard. We talk a lot about business dashboards now, but the humble dashboard had its origins within the automobile, thinking about, firstly, that one's a classic car. I think it's a Jaguar E-Type. Now we've got much more complex dashboards. In this case, we've got a Tesla. It's got a huge touchscreen with navigation control. As you've got able to probably change the ambience within the car, the music, and so on. Formula One dashboard, very important for the Formula One driver. You've got things on here that you wouldn't have on a normal steering wheel. So things like the drag reduction system button, which and the engine mode. So you can tweak the parameters of your car while you're driving along at 200 miles per hour, which is mad to me. But again, this is different to the dashboard that they've got on the Jaguar and even on the Tesla. And then finally, I think this is the Air Shuttle, the NASA space shuttle that has all kinds of things on its dashboard. But the important theme that runs throughout all of these humble dashboards is that they are created for the purpose of the user. They're created for the driver of the Jaguar, for the driver of the modern driver of the Tesla, for the Formula One driver who needs all those extra buttons, and then for the space shuttle driver that needs all kinds of things because they're doing things which are super advanced. So the important thing here is you're not designing necessarily for yourself, you're designing for the user, for the driver, and in most of these cases for the business driver, the person that is going to be using your dashboard to take some kind of decision, to inform them of a process, to alert them of something that has gone above target or below target for a month. They're the ones that are using it, and therefore you need to think about what they need before you even start putting your dashboard together. So we'll go through a few how not to do it, a few poor examples, a bit like the data viz in the wild. This is the BizTrees one. When I actually type in bad dashboard, I think this is one of the first things that comes up, which was interesting. And then I was relieved to see that the title was how not to do it rather than one that had been put up as a showcase. So chart choices. When you've got temporal data there, this is going back to section 2, thinking about which chart is going to fit your data. So we can see here we've got temporal data, January, February, March. Perhaps if we were to flip that and we had it the months across that x-axis, and usually temporal data is best shown in a line chart. Shipping cost per country. Here we've got a table. Maybe instead of a table, we could use a map in this case, or even a bar chart would be better. Here we've just got a lot of numbers. We're not making use of those visual cues, that sensory memory at all. Generally, this won't be the case in every single dashboard, but generally best to avoid non-standard charts. When you start out on your Tableau journey in particular, I've noticed there is a strong trend to use the bubble chart. It's one of the ones in the Show Me, and people quite like the look of it. Sometimes can be a really useful chart, but for the most cases, I have found that it's not usually the best way of presenting the data for your audience. It might look snazzy, but it isn't necessarily going to get the business user to the insight that they need. Color, we've spoken a lot about color in the earlier sections. What applies to a single visualization applies to a whole dashboard. So first off, there are far too many colors going on, especially in this category chart over here. Secondly, in every single chart, I think the color means a different thing. So when we're putting several charts together on our dashboard, think about how you can make a link between those different colors by using the same color in more than one instance. So in this case, I think we've got the cause design is blue, but in the severity, the design is critical. The blue is critical. So yeah, if at all possible, make sure that your color scheme is fairly minimalist. Make sure that a single color means a single thing across several different charts on your dashboard. And where you need to, it's much better to have the legend for that chart embedded within the space of that chart rather than somewhere far off and distant where you have to scroll across different things. That is actually an example of something that Tableau does by default that is quite poor, I think. When you drag on something and it creates this long channel down the right-hand side of all of your filters and all of your legends. Filters, maybe that's okay, but for legends in particular, I find it's much better to have the legend associated with a particular chart. And then finally, thinking about how many charts you're actually going to get on your dashboard. So this is extremely overpowering. Quite regularly see charts where dashboards where you've got maybe 9, 10 different charts on there. You're trying to answer every single question, and it becomes extremely difficult. It's very difficult to know where to focus. The layout is all over the place. It's just too much. So yeah, generally I try to stick to maybe 3 to 4 charts on a dashboard. Interestingly, I've also seen people go the other way, having a single chart and 15 different filters. That again isn't really ideal. You should be able to use the power of dashboard interactions to not necessarily require so many filters. So perhaps top left we've got a high level overview. Top right maybe we've got a subcategory basis, something a bit lower in the hierarchy. Underneath that, you've got a different view, and then often people will want the most granular level of their data, maybe in a table as well. So having that table and that layout of the dashboard where you go from highest level to level below it to level below it, and the way that people view the dashboard and drilling down over different things and interacting with it can make a real difference. So this particular example takes it to an extreme. We've obviously got a lot of different charts, far too many charts on here. But generally try and stick to 3 to 4. So not too many, but also not too few. Don't necessarily just have a single chart with 20 filters. Make use of the interactions and make use of the ability to click on one chart that will filter or will highlight something on other charts on your dashboard. So there's a few steps here thinking about building your own dashboards. Here's one that I put on Tableau Public quite recently. It was more showcasing all of the different features that I had seen in the last 10 months that clients have been asking for, things like parameter actions, things like set actions. This uses a technique called proportional brushing to, so when you click on Lewis Hamilton, for example, it will proportionally brush in the rest of the charts the items that are relevant to him. So of his pole positions, 26 of them came at McLaren, 62 came at Mercedes, for example. Other things on here, things like field swapping and sheet swapping, being able to change from relative to absolute percentages. So all of that is on Tableau Public, and you can download that if you want to have a look at how the calculations work and also how it's been presented. But when we're going to go through a few steps now, just to wrap everything up to go through when you're thinking about building your own dashboards, what should you be considering? What stages, what process should you go through? So the first one is, who is your audience? This goes back to our driver. Who is the business driver? Who is the person at the wheel, and who's going to be making the decisions, or who's going to be using your dashboard for something? So it might be, put this slide up, it might be Joe from HR. It's really useful for you to go and identify and often to actually sit down and have a conversation with the person that you're going to be creating it for. If it's for multiple people, maybe it's useful to hold a couple of interviews, maybe a small informal focus group, just to understand what exactly is their business case, why are you designing it, and what are they going to be actually using it for. So first off, define your audience. Who's going to be the person that's going to be looking at your dashboard? Second is what is important to them. So this is all about questions, and I've put some questions up that are not necessarily what you should be asking for your cases. The best analogy I can use is when there is a child that will consistently ask why at the end of the question. You really want to drill down to the bottom of what your question actually is. So these are the reason I put these up is they're very high level questions. They're kind of out there, they're big thinking questions, whereas the questions that you're going to be asking are much more detailed, and you really want to push the audience, push the user, drill down into exactly what questions you're trying to get to them to answer. So they give you an answer. So let's take the example of a football scout. You're creating a dashboard for your next match opponent, and they say, I'd like a dashboard showing me the sprints per 90, for example. You then ask, well, okay, why do you need the sprints per 90? They might come back to you and say, well, I need to know how to tell my defenders to mark, what they should be aware of, when they should be doing that. And so by going down that extra level, and you can keep on going down extra levels to really understand the definition of the question that they're trying to answer, before you then go ahead and design the appropriate visualization and the appropriate charts to answer that question. The third step is often to wireframe, to get your pencils out. So a lot of people looking in visualization will say that the pencil is their favorite tool. Often when you're building in Tableau, you can do a whole host of formatting changes, and all of a sudden someone comes back and says, I don't like it like that, let's change it. So often getting your first draft out on pencil, you've got a rubber on the end of the pencil, you can change things around, you can screw it up and throw it in the bin and then start again. But getting that rough sketch of how things are going to look, both in dashboard design and also often in infographic design as well, it's really important to have an idea of where you're going. So it might be that you start writing down with the questions, and then you do a very brief mock-up. It doesn't have to look very good. I think this is a pretty good sketch. Whoever did this is very talented. It doesn't have to look perfect. It's just a sketch of what you think, where maybe if you've got 4 different boxes for where your chart's going to go, thinking about what's going to go in each of them. And then finally, it then comes about putting the dashboard together. And I've highlighted a few things here that I think are really important, thinking about the aesthetics of your dashboard and what that means to you as the person creating it, and also what then the person that is going to be using it will experience on the other side. So the first one is layout, hugely important. This comes back to thinking about how many graphs you've got on there. Where does the filtering system go? Is my title in the top left-hand corner of the dashboard? Is the attribution and the source of the data down in the bottom right and the bottom left, perhaps? And then in the bulk of the dashboard, so outside of the contextual information, such as the title and such as the attributions, you've got to think about how the person is going to interact. So a lot of eye tracking tests have suggested that the first place that someone will look on the dashboard is in the top left-hand corner. So often it's useful to have your highest level information right there at the top, the most important information up the top, just underneath the title, maybe a bit of space, and then have that. And that's why often you'll see that when people talk about KPIs, or sometimes they're referred to as bands, which is big ass numbers, that is what you have at the top of your screen, followed by then your charts, maybe in a little bit of a grid format. Font, we spoke about font again a little bit earlier, thinking about what font you're going to use both for your dashboard in general, and then also for little things. So sizing of worksheet titles. So you might have your dashboard title quite large at the top, and then a subtitle slightly smaller. And then you've got your individual worksheets that make up the rest of your dashboard. Having them smaller again, maybe, or larger, really depends on what works for your dashboard and the message that you're trying to pull across. Transparency. This is something that I use a lot for aesthetics. It's a little tip. Whenever you're designing a chart, so bar chart, scatter plot. Particularly effective on scatter plots is having the dashboard be slightly more transparent, so that you can actually see where scatter points on the scatter plot are overlapping each other. But if you generally drop the transparency to about 80%, then you get this really nice kind of clean, airy looking feel about your charts that I think works really well. Color we've spoken about already. Titles, really important to have that one in the top left-hand corner. And then I often have worksheet titles as well that maybe don't always just use the default ones. Have something that actually describes what is going on in the sheet that you're looking at. And then filters, these can be quite a big contention point. Where do we place the filters? Is it at the top? Is it on the right-hand side? Is it on the left-hand side? Is it all over the place? My personal preference, especially if you're working on versions, I think it's 2019.3 and above, you've got the show and hide containers. So my personal preference is using a separate layout container, putting all my filters in there, and then making it a show and hide, so that you have to click on on the little hamburger icon at the top of the screen, and that will then split out all of our filters. Because ideally we don't want them taking up too much space, but we also want them to be relatively accessible for the user to need where they are required. If you don't have that version, my recommendation would be have your filters in a consistent place across all of your dashboards. So if you're going to have them on the left, that's fine, have them on the left, but keep them on the left throughout all of your different dashboards. Give them space, but not too much space. So I've seen some dashboards where they're taking up about a third of the screen. Usually a thin column is absolutely fine. Maybe you want to shade it in a slightly different color to call out that they are the filtering system, and so on. So I think with time, we're going to just skip through these quite quickly. The idea was that I was just going to make a few comments on how things have been done poorly or particularly well in these dashboards, but there was one that I did want to call out, and that is this one. So there seems to have been, in the last month or so maybe, a bit of a move towards designing Tableau dashboards in a way that maybe software developers might design for websites. So actually, it's not too difficult to do. A lot of this was designed in the background, so either in PowerPoint or in Adobe Illustrator, and it was brought in as a background. And after that, to get that kind of padded feeling that comes across, all you're doing is adding a bit of shading to items in PowerPoint or Illustrator, and then dropping in your sheets on top of those. So actually, if you strip back all of the data on this, the background does a lot of the work here, but I think it's a really, really nice way of presenting something that looks sleek, that is good in the way that it is laid out. Font's very clean, but quite stylish. Again, it's thinking about a few of these things and thinking about your own experiences of where you've seen really well-designed pieces of work in the past, and making the most use of those. So really, really good website for that is something called material.io. That is the one that Google designers have made public for how they go about designing things, and it goes through everything from your titles to it's even got stuff on animation. So that's one of the newer features in Tableau, being able to animate your dashboards. How should you animate them? How long? Should they start slow and get faster, or should they start fast and then get slower? That kind of thing. So they go into a tremendous amount of detail. That's material.io, and some really good stuff on there. So last point, style guides. A few organizations now have put together style guides, not just branding style guides, but specific Tableau data visualization style guides. These are two really good examples of them that you can actually go ahead and download. These are both on Tableau Public. So here's JLL's one. This one was done by Simon Beaumont and team. And it basically provides an example for all of your analysts, especially if you're working in a center of excellence. You've got lots of people that are designing their own dashboards. Having a style guide can be really important for consistency, for your users, that they know what to expect, they know how to interpret different things and so on. So one of the things that I really like on this particular one is the use of this click action and the hover action. So if they see a red arrow next to the thing, that means that they can click on it. If they see black or a gray arrow, then that means that they can hover over it and it'll give them some kind of extra insight. So style guides really useful. You can download them from other companies. You can fit them to your own, or you can just start from scratch and you can come up with a style guide that is really useful for your entire company.